It was 2:47 on a Thursday afternoon when my boss leaned across his desk and said the words that would change everything. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 32 years old, and I'd been working as a management consultant at Riverside Partners in downtown Seattle for 4 years. 4 years of 80-hour weeks, missed birthdays, relationships that fell apart because I was always at the office. I'd earned my spot. I was good at what I did. Better than good. My client retention rate was 94%, the highest on my team. So when David Thompson, the regional director, called me in for my annual review, I thought I'd finally hear the words I'd been waiting for: senior consultant. The promotion I'd been working toward since the day I started. Instead, he closed the door, sat back in his leather chair, and smiled. He said my numbers were impressive. He said clients loved me. Then he paused, looked me up and down slowly, and said, if I wanted that promotion, I needed to be more friendly, not just with clients, with management, with him specifically. He suggested we grab drinks sometime, get to know each other better. His hand moved across the desk toward mine. I pulled back. He laughed and said I was too tense, that successful women knew how to play the game. My stomach turned. My face burned. I nodded, mumbled something about having a client call, and got out of there as fast as I could without running. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall until 3 a.m. I kept replaying it, the way he'd looked at me. The emphasis on friendly, the implication hanging in the air like smoke. I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood. Maybe he really did just mean networking, team bonding, normal office socializing. But my gut knew better. And what terrified me most was the thought that this was my life now. 4 years of sacrifice, leading to a choice between my dignity and my career. In the next 20 minutes, you'll discover how I turned that impossible choice into the fight that would expose him, protect 6 other women, and change everything about how I understood my own power. I'd joined Riverside Partners right out of grad school. 28 years old with a brand new MBA and enough student loan debt to buy a house. The firm was mid-sized, about 200 employees, specializing in operational efficiency for tech companies. I'd started as a junior consultant making $65,000 a year. By year 4, I was at $92,000. Good money, but not enough to feel secure in Seattle where rent alone took half my paycheck. The promotion to senior consultant meant a jump to $130,000 plus bonuses. It meant financial breathing room. It meant I could finally pay down my loans, maybe even save for a down payment. It meant everything. David Thompson had been my boss for 2 years. He was 46, married with 3 kids whose photos lined his office shelves. Everyone thought he was a great guy. Charismatic, funny, the kind of manager who remembered your birthday and asked about your weekend. He mentored young consultants, took people under his wing. Half the women in the office had worked directly under him at some point. I'd thought I was lucky to be on his team. He gave me high-profile clients, praised my work in meetings, told me I had a bright future at the firm. I'd trusted him. That's what made the shift so disorienting. Looking back, I can see the pattern started earlier. Small things I'd brushed off as awkward or overly friendly. Comments about my appearance, how good I looked in that dress, how I should wear my hair down more often. Compliments that lasted a beat too long. Standing too close in the elevator, his hand on my lower back guiding me into conference rooms. None of it was actionable on its own. That's what made it so insidious. Each incident was small enough to second-guess. Was I overreacting? Being too sensitive? Reading something that wasn't there? But that Thursday afternoon in his office, the subtext became text. There was no more pretending I didn't understand what he wanted. The next morning, I came in early and did what any scared, confused woman would do. I Googled. Sexual harassment in the workplace. How to report harassment. Hostile work environment. What I found made my blood run cold. Story after story of women who reported and got fired. Women who were blacklisted from their industries. Women who fought and lost everything. The statistics were brutal. Only about 30% of harassment victims ever report. Of those who do, 68% experience retaliation. I learned new terms. Quid pro quo harassment, where career advancement is tied to sexual favors. That was my situation exactly. But knowing the legal definition didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel trapped. I thought about going to HR. Riverside Partners had a whole section in the employee handbook about harassment policies. Zero tolerance, multiple reporting channels, anonymous hotlines. It all looked great on paper. But I'd been there long enough to know how things really worked. David Thompson wasn't just any manager. He was the golden boy. He brought in 40% of the firm's West Coast revenue. Partners loved him. Clients requested him specifically. And HR? They reported directly to the executive team, the same people who depended on David's client relationships. Going to them felt like walking into an ambush, so I made a different choice. I decided to document everything. If he was going to make my promotion contingent on sleeping with him, I was going to make sure I had proof. That weekend, I went to Best Buy and bought a small digital recorder, the kind journalists use. I tested it in my apartment, recording myself talking from different distances, checking the clarity. Then I downloaded a recording app on my phone as backup. Washington is a two-party consent state for recording, which meant I needed to be careful about how I used this. I couldn't legally record him without his knowledge, but I could record myself documenting what happened immediately after each interaction, creating a contemporaneous record. And I could record any conversation where I verbally disclosed I was recording, even if he didn't realize my phone was on. Monday morning, I went back to work with my phone in my jacket pocket, voice-activated recording app running. I started keeping a detailed log. Date, time, location. Exact words said, witnesses present. I saved every email he sent, screenshotted every text message. When he asked me to stay late to work on a proposal and everyone else had gone home, I made sure to note it. When he suggested we discuss my career trajectory over dinner at his favorite restaurant, I wrote down the name of the place, what he was wearing, how his wedding ring caught the light when he touched my hand across the table. I was building a case without knowing yet what I'd do with it. 3 weeks passed. The incidents escalated. He started calling me into his office more frequently, always finding reasons we needed private meetings. He'd close the door, sit on the edge of his desk instead of behind it, positioning himself between me and the exit. The conversations would start professional but then drift. He'd ask about my dating life, whether I was seeing anyone, tell me I was too attractive to be single, say that ambitious women understood networking sometimes meant getting close to the right people. Every time, my fight-or-flight response would kick in. My heart would race, my palms would sweat. I'd smile, deflect, escape as gracefully as possible. And the moment I got back to my desk, I'd lock myself in a bathroom stall and record everything that had just happened, my voice shaking while it was still fresh. The turning point came on a Tuesday in late October. David scheduled an off-site meeting with a client in Portland. Told me I'd be joining him. Great opportunity, he said. FaceTime with a major account. We'd drive down Monday night. Meeting was Tuesday morning. Drive back Tuesday afternoon. Simple day trip. Except when I got the calendar invite, I noticed he'd booked 2 hotel rooms at the Riverside Inn for Monday night. 2 rooms, but a shared dinner reservation at 9 p.m. My stomach dropped. I knew. I just knew. This was it. This was the setup. Get me away from the office, away from witnesses, in a city where nobody knew us. Wine at dinner? Then what? A nightcap? A walk by the river? An invitation to his room to review materials? And if I said no, I'd be the difficult one. The uptight consultant who couldn't handle client development. The woman who wasn't a team player. I'd driven to Portland with male colleagues before. I'd shared hotels on business trips. It had never felt predatory, but this was different. Everything about it felt like a trap. I didn't go. I told him I was sick. Food poisoning. Could barely leave the bathroom. So sorry. Terrible timing. He was annoyed. I could hear it in his voice when he called to check if I was okay. He said this was a critical client meeting, that my absence reflected poorly on the team. But what was he going to do? Call me a liar for claiming I was sick? He went alone, and while he was gone, I sat in my apartment and had a full breakdown. I cried for 2 hours straight. Not delicate tears, but the ugly kind where your face swells and you can't breathe. Because I realized I was already changing my behavior, already limiting my own opportunities, already shrinking to avoid him. That's what harassment does. It doesn't just make you uncomfortable in the moment. It warps your entire professional life. You start declining projects, avoiding situations, second-guessing yourself constantly. You become smaller and smaller until there's nothing left of the ambitious person you used to be. That night, I called my best friend from college, Amanda. She lived in Portland now, worked in tech. I told her everything. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't tell me I was overreacting. When I finished, she was quiet for a minute. Then she said she knew an employment attorney, someone who'd handled harassment cases before. She said I didn't have to do anything, didn't have to file a complaint or sue, but maybe just talking to someone who understood the law would help me see my options. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. The attorney's name was Rebecca Cho. She was 48, had been practicing employment law for 20 years. Her office was in a renovated building near Pike Place Market, all exposed brick and big windows overlooking the water. When I walked in, I expected someone intimidating, someone who'd make me feel stupid for not reporting sooner. Instead, she was warm. She made tea. She told me to take my time, so I did. I told her everything. The comments, the meetings, the Portland trip. I showed her my documentation logs. I played some of the recordings I'd made of myself immediately after incidents. She listened to all of it, taking notes in neat handwriting. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me. She said what I'd experienced was textbook quid pro quo sexual harassment. She said my documentation was thorough, that I'd done everything right, but then she gave it to me straight. Washington law was on my side, but the reality of fighting this kind of case was brutal. It would take years. It would cost me emotionally and financially. Even if I won, even if I got a settlement, I'd be known as the woman who sued her boss. That reputation would follow me. Tech consulting is a small world. Word gets around. Future employers would see me as a liability. Some would respect my courage. Others would see me as trouble. Was I prepared for that? I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to just quit, find a new job, move on, pretend none of this had happened. But another part of me, the part that had spent 4 years sacrificing everything for this career, was furious. Why should I have to leave? Why should I be the one whose life got derailed? He was the one breaking the law. He was the one abusing his power. And what about the next woman? If I just left quietly, he'd do this again. He'd already done it before. I was sure of it. Men like this don't just wake up one day and start harassing employees. It's a pattern. I was just the latest. Rebecca said I had 3 basic options. 1, quit and move on. 2, report to HR and see if the company handled it internally. 3, file a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and potentially sue. Each path had risks. Quitting meant giving up everything I'd worked for. Reporting to HR might work, but companies often protect valuable employees over harassment victims. And suing meant years of legal battle, public scrutiny, and uncertain outcomes. She told me to think about it. Really think. Don't decide in anger or fear. Decide based on what I could live with. I went home and didn't sleep. I made lists, pros and cons, best case scenarios and worst case scenarios, what I'd lose either way, what I might gain. By morning, I hadn't made a decision. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep working under David without protection. So I did something that would seem small, but turned out to be everything. I started recording our conversations. Not secretly. Openly. The next time David called me into his office, I walked in with my phone visible in my hand. I said before we started, I wanted him to know I was recording our conversation for my own notes. I said it casually, like it was just a productivity thing, like I recorded all my important meetings. He looked surprised, uncomfortable even. He asked why. I said I was trying to be more organized, that I wanted to make sure I accurately captured feedback from my development. What was he going to say? That I couldn't record my own performance discussions? He'd look paranoid. So he just nodded, said fine, whatever helps me. The meeting was different. He was careful, professional. No comments about my appearance, no suggestions about drinks or dinner, just actual feedback on a project. It lasted 12 minutes. When I left, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, power, Not a lot, but enough. Enough to make me realize that light and accountability were his kryptonite. He could only operate in ambiguity, in spaces where it was my word against his. But when I held up a mirror, when I made it clear his words would be preserved, he backed off. I started doing it in every meeting. "Hi, David. Just so you know, I'm recording this for my notes." Some were legitimate recordings I kept. Others, I just said I was recording even if I wasn't, just to see how his behavior changed. And it did. Dramatically. He was suddenly all business. Curt even. But here's the thing. He also started excluding me from projects, assigning my clients to other consultants, leaving me off email chains, scheduling team meetings and forgetting to invite me. I was being iced out. Retaliation. That's what Rebecca would call it later. But in the moment, I just felt isolated and scared. Then something unexpected happened. I was in the break room making coffee when another consultant, a woman named Jennifer Park, came in. Jennifer was 27, had joined the firm about 2 years ago. She was quiet, kept to herself mostly. We'd never been close. But that morning, she poured herself coffee, stood next to me, and said very quietly that she'd heard I was recording my meetings with David. I froze. Had he told people? Was I about to get in trouble? But Jennifer kept going. She said she wished she'd thought of that when he was her manager. She said he'd done the same thing to her. The comments, the inappropriate suggestions, the implication that her career advancement depended on being friendly. She'd quit before it escalated further. Took a job at a smaller firm making less money. She'd thought it was just her, that she'd somehow mishandled it. I asked if she'd ever reported it. She shook her head. Said she'd been too scared, too unsure if anyone would believe her. But now, hearing that he was doing it to me too, she felt sick, because it meant he was still at it, still using his position to pressure women. I asked if she'd be willing to talk to my attorney. She hesitated, said she'd think about it. But over the next week, she came back. She said yes. She wanted to help. She wanted him stopped. That's when the dam broke. Jennifer knew 2 other women who'd worked under David. She reached out to them. They reached out to others. Within 3 weeks, I was in touch with 6 women total. 6 women across 4 years who'd all experienced some version of the same thing. Inappropriate comments, unwanted touching, suggestions that career advancement required personal attention. One woman, Elena, said he'd actually kissed her at a company holiday party, cornered her in a coat room, and put his mouth on hers before she could react. She'd frozen, then pushed him away. He'd laughed and told her to relax. Said it was just mistletoe. There was no mistletoe. Another woman, Priya, said he'd sent her text messages late at night. Random questions about projects, but the timing was deliberate. Testing boundaries, seeing if she'd engage. When she kept responses professional, he'd grown cold. Her performance reviews went from excellent to needs improvement. She'd eventually been let go. Blamed herself. Thought she'd failed somehow. Didn't realize until years later that it was punishment for not playing along. Every story made me angrier and sicker, because I could have been any of them. I'd been lucky in some ways. I'd documented. I'd pushed back. I'd avoided the worst of it by being suspicious early. But what if I hadn't? What if I'd trusted him the way I was supposed to be able to trust my boss? I met with Rebecca again, this time with Jennifer. Rebecca's eyes lit up when we told her about the other women. She said this changed everything. One woman's complaint could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. 6 women across 4 years showing a clear pattern? That was systemic. That was provable. That was a case she could win. But winning meant all of us had to come forward. All of us had to be willing to put our names on official statements. All of us had to be ready for the fallout. We met as a group, all 6 of us, at a coffee shop on a Saturday morning. It was surreal. We were all different ages, different backgrounds, different roles at the firm. But we all shared the same experience of David Thompson deciding we were targets. We talked for 4 hours, shared our stories, cried, laughed bitterly at the similarities, and by the end, we made a pact. We were going to report him, together, not to HR first, where it could be buried, straight to the EEOC, formal complaints, legal action. All 6 of us. Rebecca helped us prepare. We each wrote detailed statements, included dates, times, locations, witnesses when available. I shared my recordings. Other women shared emails and text messages. Priya had saved her performance reviews, the dramatic shift from excellent to poor right after she'd rebuffed his advances. Elena had told her sister about the kiss the night it happened. Her sister was willing to testify about Elena's distress. We built a case that was airtight. Undeniable. Filing the complaints was terrifying. I remember sitting in Rebecca's office, staring at the paperwork. Once I signed, there was no going back. This would define my professional life for years. But I thought about 28-year-old me, walking into Riverside Partners with so much hope. I thought about every hour I'd worked, every sacrifice I'd made. I thought about the next young woman who'd join the firm, eager and talented, who'd end up in David's office getting that smile, hearing those words. I signed. We filed on a Monday morning. 6 simultaneous EEOC complaints against David Thompson and Riverside Partners. Rebecca also sent a letter to the firm's executive team and their legal counsel, outlining the allegations and putting them on notice. Then we waited. The EEOC process is slow. It can take months. But we didn't have to wait long for a response from Riverside Partners. By Tuesday afternoon, I was called into a meeting with HR and the firm's outside counsel. They wanted to hear my side. I brought Rebecca. She advised me not to say much, that anything I said could be used against me later. But I gave them the basics, confirmed my complaint, said I had documentation, let them know I wasn't alone. Their faces were hard to read, concerned but also calculating. I could see them doing the math. David was valuable, but 6 harassment complaints were a PR nightmare. They said they'd conduct a thorough investigation. They asked me to be patient. Then they said something that made my blood boil. They suggested I might be more comfortable taking paid leave while the investigation proceeded. For my own well-being, they said. So I wouldn't have to work in such a stressful environment. It sounded supportive, but I knew what it was. They wanted me gone. Out of sight. Away from other employees who might ask questions. I said no. I said I'd continue working. I said I'd done nothing wrong and had no reason to hide. They couldn't force me to take leave. Not without admitting there was a legitimate threat, which would strengthen my case. So I stayed, and it was hell. David was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But his absence didn't make things better. His supporters rallied. Rumors spread. People whispered that I was making it up, that I was bitter about not getting promoted, that I was trying to take down a good man for my own advancement. Some colleagues stopped talking to me. Others went out of their way to be overly nice in that pitying way that made me want to scream. I kept my head down and worked. I documented the retaliation too. Every excluded email, every reassigned client, every meeting I wasn't invited to. Rebecca said it was all evidence, but living it was exhausting. I'd come home every night drained, defeated. I'd cry in the shower. I stopped sleeping well. Lost weight. My mom called every few days asking if I was okay, and I'd lie and say I was fine. I wasn't fine. I was barely holding on. Then something shifted. The investigation wrapped up faster than expected. 3 weeks. Riverside Partners hired an outside firm to conduct interviews, review evidence, assess credibility. They interviewed all 6 of us. They interviewed David, who apparently denied everything. Said we'd misunderstood his mentoring style, that he was friendly with everyone, that he'd never made any inappropriate advances. They interviewed other employees, people who'd worked closely with him, and here's what broke the case wide open. 2 current employees, women who still worked under David, came forward during the investigation. They hadn't filed EEOC complaints. They'd been too scared. But when investigators asked them directly if they'd ever experienced inappropriate behavior from David Thompson, they said yes. They told their stories. That made 8 women total. 8 women don't all misunderstand the same mentoring style. 8 women don't all have the same delusion. And when investigators reviewed my recordings, when they saw the text messages, when they read the emails, when they tracked the pattern of performance reviews that changed right after women rebuffed advances, the conclusion was obvious. David Thompson was a serial harasser who'd been protected by his revenue generation and charm, and Riverside Partners had been negligent in not catching it sooner. The firm fired him on a Friday morning. I got a call from HR at 8:30. They said they'd completed their investigation, found credible evidence of policy violations, and terminated David's employment effective immediately. They apologized for what I'd experienced. They said they were implementing new training and reporting procedures. They offered me the senior consultant promotion. I almost laughed. The promotion. The thing that had started all of this. Like it was some kind of prize for surviving harassment. Like giving me the title I'd already earned would make up for months of hell. I told them I wanted more than a promotion. I wanted a formal apology. I wanted my legal fees covered. I wanted compensation for the emotional distress, the retaliation, the hostile work environment. And I wanted policy changes that actually meant something. Anonymous reporting. External investigations for senior leaders. Real consequences. They said they'd get back to me. Rebecca said that was the opening. She sent them a demand letter. Outlined everything. The harassment. The retaliation. The negligent investigation. The pattern showing institutional failure. She demanded a settlement. $350,000 split among the 6 of us who'd filed EEOC complaints. Policy changes. Non-disparagement agreements preventing the firm from bad-mouthing us to future employers. And confidentiality terms that allowed us to speak about our experiences without naming the firm specifically. They negotiated. Tried to lower the amount. Tried to add stricter confidentiality terms. But Rebecca held firm. She said we could go to trial. Let a jury hear about 8 women harassed by their boss while the company looked the other way. We could do media interviews. We could turn this into a public scandal. Or they could settle, make it right, and move forward with reforms. They chose settlement. I got the check 4 months after filing my EEOC complaint. $58,000. After taxes and legal fees, I walked away with about $42,000. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough. Enough to pay off a chunk of my loans. Enough to take a month off before starting my job search. Enough to feel like I hadn't fought for nothing. The other women got similar amounts. Jennifer cried when she got hers. Said it felt like validation. Like someone finally believed her. But the money wasn't the point. The point was, David Thompson was gone. The point was Riverside Partners had to confront what they'd allowed to happen. The point was, 8 women didn't have to work for a predator anymore. And the point was that every woman who came after us would have stronger protections, better reporting mechanisms, actual accountability. I left Riverside Partners 2 months after the settlement. I'd gotten the promotion, but I couldn't stay. The place was poisoned for me. Too many memories. Too many people who doubted me. I took a job at a competitor firm. Told them in the interview exactly why I'd left my previous employer. Decided I'd rather be honest than spend energy hiding. They hired me anyway. Said they appreciated my courage. My willingness to speak up. They made me senior consultant from day one with a salary of $140,000. Better than Riverside had offered. As for David Thompson, I heard through the grapevine that he struggled to find work. Turns out getting fired for harassment follows you. References matter. And when potential employers called Riverside Partners, they confirmed dates of employment and said they'd terminated for cause. No company wants the liability of hiring someone with that history. Last I heard, he'd left Seattle, moved somewhere smaller, took a job outside consulting. I felt no sympathy. He'd made choices that hurt people, choices that cost him the career he'd built. That's called consequences. Today, 3 years later, I'm the director of operations at my firm. I manage a team of 15 consultants. I make $185,000 a year. I paid off my student loans 6 months ago. I bought a condo overlooking Puget Sound. I have a life that feels like mine again, but I'm also the person women call when they're facing harassment at work, because word gets around. Rebecca refers clients to me. Women I've never met reach out on LinkedIn asking for advice, asking if it's worth fighting, asking if they'll survive it, and here's what I tell them. Document everything. Dates, times, exact words, witnesses. Save emails, screenshot texts, record yourself immediately after incidents. Find your people. You're probably not the only one. Harassers are repeat offenders. Get legal advice early. Know your rights before you act. Decide what you can live with. Not every fight ends in victory. Some women need to just leave for their own mental health. That's valid. But if you can fight, if you have evidence, if you have support, then fight. Because justice isn't just about you. It's about the pattern. It's about stopping someone from doing this again. It's about changing the culture that protects powerful men over vulnerable employees. Not every woman gets a settlement. Not every harasser gets fired. I know I was lucky. Lucky to have documentation. Lucky to find other victims. Lucky to have an attorney who believed me. Lucky that my employer cared more about liability than loyalty. But luck favors preparation. I made choices that positioned me to win. I didn't stay silent. I didn't minimize what was happening. I didn't convince myself it wasn't that bad. I trusted my gut. I got angry instead of sad. I turned fear into action. Sometimes I think about that Thursday afternoon in David's office. The moment he said I needed to be more friendly, the way my stomach dropped, the shame that burned through me even though I'd done nothing wrong. If I could go back, I'd tell that version of me to hit record right then. I'd tell her she's not crazy. She's not overreacting. She's not being too sensitive. What's happening is real and wrong and actionable. I'd tell her to be scared but do it anyway. Document, gather, connect, fight. I'd tell her that 2 years from now she'll be standing in a new office with a water view and a title she earned without compromising her dignity. That the fight will be worth it. Because here's the truth they don't tell you about workplace harassment. It's not about sex. It's about power. It's about men who've learned they can use their position to extract things from women. Attention, compliance, access, silence. And they get away with it because systems protect them. Because women are taught to be nice, to not make waves, to question their own perceptions. Because reporting is hard and retaliation is real and the odds are stacked. But those odds are changing, slowly. Because of women who fight. Women who document. Women who refuse to disappear. You might be that woman. You might be reading this while sitting at your desk, wondering if what's happening to you counts as harassment. Let me tell you, if your boss makes comments about your body, that counts. If advancement seems tied to personal attention, that counts. If you feel scared or uncomfortable or diminished, that counts. Your instincts are right, and you have options. You don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to protect someone who's hurting you. You can gather evidence. You can find allies. You can get legal help. You can fight. And you can win. I won't pretend it's easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than 4 years of 80-hour weeks. Harder than grad school. Harder than any client project. But it was also the most important, because I didn't just save my career. I saved myself. I took back the power David had tried to steal. I proved that my voice mattered. That my boundaries mattered. That my dignity wasn't negotiable. And now, when I walk into work every day, I know I'm there because I'm good at what I do. Not because I played anyone's game. Not because I compromised. But because I refused to let someone make me smaller than I am. If you're facing workplace harassment, you're not alone. There are 6 women from my story who know exactly what you're feeling. There are millions more who've walked this path. Some fought and won. Some fought and lost. Some chose different paths. All of them survived, and so will you. Whatever you decide, decide from strength. Decide knowing your worth. Decide believing that you deserve better than what's being offered. Because you do. Every woman in every workplace deserves to advance based on merit, not on willingness to tolerate abuse. That's not idealism. That's basic human dignity. And it's worth fighting for.